Hello everyone and welcome back to Obscure History. Today we are going to be looking at a Cold War project with the idea of creating a type of aircraft that could fly technically forever. Now of course this aircraft came at the birth of the nuclear age when we thought nuclear technology could do anything. So let's go ahead and look at how we got the idea of making these aircraft that never needed to land. Now, since the dawn of the nuclear age, and that can either be the very beginning, when we first developed the first nuclear reactor, or when we detonated the first atomic bomb, there has been the idea of what to do with this massive amount of power that you could harness. And it essentially went two ways. Propulsion, as seen here with the USS Nautilus, the world's first nuclear-powered submarine, or as a weapon, as seen here with the R-7 rocket, the first rocket capable of carrying a nuclear payload, or even the American counterpart, the Atlas rocket. Now, as nuclear missiles were still in their infancy in the 1950s, heavy bombers were chosen as the means of carrying these weapons of destruction. And these bombers had to be incredibly large, like the B-36 here, which still has the longest wingspan of any military aircraft ever built, had to be able to carry 10,000-pound nuclear bombs, and that was per bomb. So there was a need for a long-range bomber that didn't need to constantly refuel because of its heavy load. And that's where the idea came of putting a nuclear reactor inside of a bomber. And the idea was to use the cycle of a nuclear reactor, the cooling and heating cycle of it, to help drive the propulsion system of it. And in theory, it could indefinitely power an aircraft, just as a nuclear submarine basically has almost unlimited propulsion until its reactor basically runs out and needs to be refueled. And in fact, two reactors were actually made for this purpose, HTRE-2 and 3, as seen here. And the United States even went beyond just building the reactors. They actually had plans to convert two Convair B-36s. The first of these was the NB-36H. And this aircraft holds the credit of being the only aircraft ever built to actually have a nuclear reactor inside of it. And the aircraft actually did have the reactor as operational for about 89 flight hours during testing, so they could see what type of shielding would be necessary, how much this would affect the flight capabilities, things like that. It didn't power the airplane, but they were able to at least see what an operational reactor could do inside an aircraft. Now, the second aircraft that would have been the Convair X6, and this one was actually supposed to have the reactor powering the propellers on it. However, the X6 was scrapped in favor of the development of ICBMs and other missiles like that are capable of carrying a nuclear payload. However, had the project succeeded, we would have got the WS-125. This rather unusual-looking aircraft would have been a super long-range strategic bomber, powered by a pair of General Electric J-87 turbojet engines that would have been powered by a nuclear reactor on board the aircraft. Now, interestingly enough, these engines actually had been tested and worked. And honestly, I don't know about y'all, but this kind of looks like a nuclear-powered version of a C-130 Hercules to me. And this aircraft wouldn't have been alone. Northrop actually independently developed the N-34, which would have been their own nuclear-powered aircraft. This concept aircraft actually had a detachable reactor in the front part of the aircraft that could be removed and replaced, and the crew actually flew inside the tail of the aircraft. And while the United States banned the nuclear jet, it was not the end of nuclear propulsion for an aircraft. Instead, they moved on to a nuclear-powered ramjet for hypersonic flight capability, with the idea of this being deployed on the SLAM, also known as the Supersonic Low-Altitude Missile, which would have been a nuclear-powered cruise missile. Now, in order to make this missile, it actually had to forgo a lot of the things that the earlier nuclear-powered aircraft have, such as shielded reactors. So when this missile was in flight, it actually emitted high levels of radiation, making the exhaust potentially as dangerous as the nuclear blast itself. But just like the nuclear-powered aircraft, the SLAM would be canceled in favor of the ICBM, mainly due to its capabilities of delivering a payload in a much lower amount of time. And that would be essentially the end of the American version of nuclear-powered propulsion for aircraft. However, they were not alone, and the Soviets did end up joining them. Now, initial reports in 1958 stated that the Soviet program was 3 to 5 years ahead of the United States program, and because of that, the NB-36 actually got a few more months, even year or so out of it, and the SLAM program was developed. However, the reality was the Soviets didn't begin developing their nuclear-powered aircraft until roughly 1961. Now, their aircraft of choice was a modified Tu-95 with the nuclear reactor in its bomb bay, doing basically the same thing the NB-36 did, just testing the capabilities of a reactor and the shielding needed and things like that. However, just like the United States, they realized the ICBM was a much better weapon and abandoned their nuclear-powered aircraft program. However, that would not be the end of their nuclear-powered aircraft propulsion projects. In 2018, Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Russia had developed a new nuclear-powered cruise missile capable of carrying a nuclear warhead that could evade air and missile defenses and hit any point in the globe without any issues. And he also made some other claims about the aircraft, that it went over the Cape of Horn and was completely evaded and made it all the way to Hawaii. There was no way to substantiate these claims. However, it was confirmed that yes, the United States was aware of a cruise missile test by the Russians, but they officially stated that the Russians' missile system was nowhere near as ready as they said it was, and in fact, the test in 2017 had ended in the missile crashing somewhere in the Arctic. Now, not much is known about this missile other than that its name is the NM-730 Burevestnik, and that it is not powered by a nuclear ramjet like the SLAM missile, but more like a subsonic vehicle with a nuclear-heated turbojet or a turbofan engine. But there you have it, the time that we tried to put nuclear reactors in aircraft to propel them, and that it didn't really go that well. But had it, we would probably have the capability of aircraft that never needed to basically stop flying. Which, in terms of, say, the global cargo market, like we see today with Amazon Prime deliveries and things like that, the ability to not have to refuel a cargo aircraft would have been amazing. Of course, there's the danger of what happens if the aircraft crashes and spreads nuclear fuel everywhere. So, obviously, we don't have it to this day. But that's it for today. The next part I'm going to do is probably going to be my final part, where we're talking about nuclear-powered propulsion, and that will be things like Project Orion, which is when we tried to build a spaceship that basically used small nuclear explosions to propel itself through space. So that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you all the next time.